All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for checking out my show, the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? I'm actually back on the road here. This is a lot of times when I do my podcast is when I drive, so hopefully the audio isn't too distracting to you, but it's the best time for me to clear my mind, say what I have to say, get nuts without being bothered. I'm actually driving to Kansas City right now. Anyways. So what I want to go through is that I was actually just texting my friend, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. I hope it doesn't come off offensive. And it's regarding when being a father and like kind of having an identity crisis. I think I went through this. I don't know if a lot of other guys, I do think they go through this, a lot of different guys. Now more than ever compared to what my father and my father's friends went through. And I think what happened with me is, and I absolutely love being a father more than anything. The truth is, my first daughter ended up having to need a liver transplant. So that was very shocking. The first year of her life, she was basically in the hospital more than she was out. That would be the 1 year that I lost like 40, 50 pounds. I used to work out like a madman, and I went through a lot of different changes. Physically, emotionally, it was very hard. And what's interesting is later down the line, my other daughter ended up with diabetes 1. Talk about a fucking, fluke, having 2 children going through that. And people used to always ask me, how do you go through it? How do you go? I'm like, I ain't fucking going through it. My daughters are the ones who go through it, right? I mean, I can only do so much, and I will say, different things happen to you when you have a sick child, obviously financially, even regardless what situation you are in, you're going to be spending a lot of time and a lot of money in and out of hospitals and paying a lot of bills. I don't give a fuck who you are, how big of an insurance policy you have. You're going to always have disputes. So I don't care if, the one thing I'll tell you though, since we're on that subject, if you have a sick child, I always say go to the best. I had a step aunt. She went through one of her sons was sick for a long time. No disrespect to her. She kept sticking with a certain hospital that she fell in love with. But she never truly, I think, to a certain degree, went to the specialist and changing her entire life to do that, which I understand sometimes when you have a job, you have another child, it's hard to do, but you have to go to where the best is regarding medical attention. Mine, after, we had a couple surgeries and they said, listen, and this goes back 20 years, and this goes when, transplants wasn't that common. I knew about Mickey Mantle getting a transplant. I remember that happening and me saying, he's got 6 months to live, this guy, and he practically did pass away after that. So when they said my daughter needed a transplant, it was shocking. My ex-wife was on a mission. She's unbelievable. She put it all together. But nonetheless, when I heard that, and that was after a couple surgeries, we literally said, I went right to the doctor. We kept going to all these, different specialists. And I just said, what does she have? Because a lot of the jargon and the medical terms were fucking crazy. And I said, I don't care about all that, like this and that and this and, blah, blah, blah. Where is the best doctor in the world, or at least in North America, that I can go see? And they said, well, the best team was in Boston. The best doctor right now is in Chicago Memorial. And I said, really? I'm from Chicago. We're moving to Chicago. That's the doctor. So we went out there. My daughter we're having a huge baptism for her. I want to make sure she got baptized, obviously. So we're there. The team of doctors came in. It was literally about 15 of them. He came walking. He looked at her and literally said, she needs a transplant immediately. Her jaundice levels are off the chart. We don't do it soon. She's going to end up with brain damage and blah, blah, blah. So didn't mean to jump into that. But if you ever do need medical attention, I don't care if it's for you, your parents, or anyone, you go to the best. There's no fucking around. I don't care if you're trying to save money. I don't care if you love your doctor here. Like I said, I don't care if you don't have, the time. I don't care if you have to change your career or whatever you have to do. You need to get to whoever does whatever you need done to the highest level, right? Just think about that. A lot of times people just blow that. They don't think it's as serious as it is, and it is very serious. If you start at the top and then it fails or if something goes wrong, at least you really went, I believe, to the best. Anyways, so back to being this situation where I fell into year after year, and then I had another daughter, Demi. Actually, my ex-wife had my second child, my other daughter was recovering from the transplant in Chicago. So out of a fluke, we ended up bringing both of them home the same day. But I was bouncing between two hospitals in the middle of, it was at the end of January in Chicago. I had to go from one hospital to the other. One time it snowed. It was like 17 inches of snow. It was literally like only, like I saw a couple buses stuck in the snow. Nobody was driving downtown Chicago, and I saw one cab, and he was just cruising through to get home, and I waved him down. I was literally in knee-high, and it was freezing at this point, and I just waved him down. I said, listen, and he's like, hey, I think I'm just trying to get home. I'm sorry, my sign's off, but I waved him down. I said, dude, can you please help me? I just had, I have two children. I just had a child, and I have another one here, and I'm kind of bouncing between hospitals. He's like, of course, he was like an angel. And it's amazing to be in a city like Chicago where it shuts down. A lot of people, like I'm walking down Michigan Avenue, literally in the middle of the street, and there was no one there, which is pretty kind of crazy. Anyway, so you fast forward, I did everything. We moved to Florida, back to Florida, my daughter. We went back and forth, Chicago, Florida. The weather in Chicago was just kicking my youngest daughter's ass. And she seemed to excel in warmer climates, and we even discussed this. And finally, they even came out at the hospital and said, they've been doing studies on children that live in California, Arizona, Florida, warmer climates, and it just seems like they're doing not necessarily better to a certain degree, but they're they seem to be excelling, and they weren't like if it was in New York, Chicago, Boston, they were indoors more, where in the warmer climate just seemed to be getting better results to a certain degree. At least that's what I was told. But we ended up, I said, my daughters, they love Disney, they love movies, they loved all that. So we just said, that's it. We're going to stay in Florida, but her doctors are in Chicago. I fly back and forth. It took a lot of time and a lot of money, but I did it. And both of them are doing well. But as time went on, I went and ended up getting all my season tickets to Disney, SeaWorld, Universal Studios, Wet n Wild. I was able to work for my father. I had the luxury of kind of picking up my kids, dropping them off at school, and being involved with every aspect of their life. One of my daughters played 4 sports a year, or at least 2 or 3. The other one was obsessed with modeling and acting, and I had a lot of time spending with them, more and more and more, and I loved every minute of it. I wouldn't change it for anything. But as they were getting older, heading into like junior high, I ended up actually getting a divorce around then, and I think one of the reasons I got a divorce too is because I started to slide into a Mr. Mom position, which I had also one of my daughter's friends' father was kind of sliding in that position. We're good buddies, still are. He lives in Boston. He's a great father. And I could tell that I was becoming, your kids start to live their own life a little bit. You want them to. And then you find yourself like revolving every aspect of your life around your 2 kids. That's kind of where I found myself. My wife worked her ass off, and then she'd come home. It was fine. But the truth is I despise kind of being then looked at as a Mr. Mom. Because even when I traveled a lot of times, I would just take my 2 daughters. And I started to get really aggravated, too, because we kind of had a rhythm, whatever we wanted to do. We'd either go on vacations with my ex-wife, and it would just be me and my 2 daughters. Like, we were in a rhythm all the time. And it was even when we went to the theme parks, water parks, whatever we did, we were like always rocking and rolling. Everybody kind of held us back. I guess it was kind of selfish. But I started to be looked at as Mr. Mom, right? A guy who was always with his kids, which I loved. I mean, I don't want this to get misconstrued. I love every aspect of that. Would I do it again? No. If I ended up having a child now in my life, I would never probably put the time in or do the things that I did with my kids then. I think one is, obviously having a sick child is one thing. And 2 is I was waiting for my 2 daughters my whole life. I even wrote about it in my high school journal. So I was waiting for them too. And when they came, I just was so excited about that. Not saying if I had another child, I would neglect it. None of that shit. I live a different life now. I travel a lot. I'm busy. I'm not at the point in my life, nor do I have the patience like I did when I was younger, a younger guy. Physically, too, I was a machine. Either, I could do anything. I'd carry him around Disney. I was very strong, both of my arms, or any park. I just had the endurance, too, that I don't think I have now. But back to kind of falling into an identity crisis, I really slowly but surely despised being a Mr. Mom character. And I always went against what my father was. So my father was an absentee father. which, my mother and father got divorced. So my father owned a nightclub till I was like 14. So he was usually at the club, except on Sundays. He'd come and see me, and we would either go to the movies, go to a comedy club, go see a concert, or I would spend time at his nightclub. My cousin lived near my dad's nightclub, so I would stay with her. And my father actually set up an apartment in his club. He had a house, too, on the lake that he rent. So I would be downstairs. He was one of the first guys, I think, in Illinois. He piped in MTV, which was really weird. I'm dating myself to the early 80s. But, my father then, he was gone, too, a lot of times. His buddy was a pilot, so they would fly. I don't know where the hell my father would fly sometimes. He'd always leave, come back, be tan. He's flying to, I don't know, Jamaica, Bahamas. He's all over Florida, obviously California, Arizona. And it was kind of a mystery, my old man, from that point. He's kind of like a celebrity, my father. He owned a nightclub and whatever. I like that. And then my mother was a religious freak, Catholic religious freak, so I kind of had both of those things going on. Talk about identity and whatever. Talk about like just having two totally different identities. But then when it came to my life, I always kind of was like, you know what, I want to be the father that's always there. But I think I almost became overbearing. And I had a close friend who's Italian, Sicilian, who owns two of the most popular restaurants in Orlando, Florida. And, like they call them helicopter parents, where I was always like afraid for my daughters. I didn't trust anybody. All these type of things. And I was always and she's like, you have to learn how to let your children grow a little bit without you, right? And she was absolutely right. But after I got my divorce, my kids were going to basically live with me, but I had obviously work to do as well. And at the same time, my father just sold his business, previously actually, so I didn't really have a job. I was kind of taking care of my kids right before my divorce. Now I'm responsible. My kids were just so used to being with me, they were going to live with me. And then I ended up having a discussion with my ex, who wanted to start taking the children more, which was wonderful. And then it would give me an opportunity to start working more. And this is all in 2008, when it was like the worst economic whatever. And I had the most wonderful divorce. I'm not going to say anything regarding that. But again, I was in that Mr. Mom position. And I always felt like every second I was away from my kids, I'm like, oh my God, I got to pick up. Oh no, I got to work. You don't always have to be the one to pick up your kids. You're not always going to have to be the one every weekend, take them somewhere. You don't always have to be at every single practice, every single sporting event. And it was nice to see, because my ex-wife really, stepped up and started to do a lot of things that I used to do, which she always, I think, wanted to do. And I think part of the reason she didn't do them is because I was overbearing, or we didn't have the patience sometimes to do what she wanted to do. Or if we went to a park, she'd want to leave at 5 and we want to shut it down, or she didn't want to have anything to do with certain things. That's all we wanted to do at times. And I partially blame myself with that. Even going to movies, it was what me and my kids wanted to see, really never what she wanted to see. And a lot of, when you go through a divorce, you blame yourself to it. So you need to sometimes acknowledge where your strengths and weaknesses were. I was obsessed with, at that time, wanting to be a filmmaker. All I thought about was taking care of my kids and making movies, right? And that was just my own doing. But I see a lot of parents now become overly obsessed with their kids, and a lot of them are my friends. They wrap their whole life into their kids, and I think a lot of times, and this isn't a dig on my friend, not all my friends. My closest friends are unbelievable dads, unbelievable, and that's what's wonderful about them. But I shouldn't even say it's my close friends, but I just see a lot of parents in general that revolve every aspect of their life, day and night, around their kids sporting events, their schooling and everything, which is great. But I think, as I realize, there's a fine line between going too far and this is maybe just me now. I just see people, and it's almost too dorky for me. And I think, too, sometimes, as far as me falling into the Mr. Mom, I should say, my ex-wife or other people, they respect that you're such a loving father and you're doing all these things. But on the other end, I think you're kind of looked at as a pussy. And I don't care how tough or how big or how strong you are, because I was probably pretty damn big, pretty strong and whatever. And I wasn't the type of guy who took shit from anybody. I'm like 240 pounds. I was strong. I wasn't fucking around. But I think kind of just falling into something where I still think a dad's a dad, right? And if you're always around your kids, I'm not saying you become soft, but your kids kind of see you in a different way. And after a while, I started to think I really liked more of how my dad was kind of more, I guess you could say, edgier. He was more, I guess you could say, there's more of a mystique about him and a uniqueness about him. Not the guy that, and this doesn't mean that you're lying to your children or any of that bullshit, but not the dad that was just always up your ass either, right? It's like, I like that my dad would sometimes just show up randomly out of my baseball games or my football games, or just say, hey, we're flying to Miami in a weekend, like, let's go. And I didn't just, and then when I did move with my dad, I ended up moving with him when I was 18 years old to Florida. There was a lot of things I liked and didn't like about my dad, because I never, really grew up with my dad. So I had a lot of things in common with him, and a lot of things aggravated him. And I'm not saying we were strangers. I even spent some summers with my dad in Florida. I went to tennis camp and did other things as well. How interesting. My father was just calling me while I'm doing the podcast on the phone. So I think I was always, after living with him, I'm like, I want to be a different type of dad. I want to be a different type of man. But as I'm older now, I really realized, as much as I didn't want to be like my father, I am really like him in so many ways, and I had to quit fighting it. That doesn't mean I'm running a nightclub like he did or living a certain lifestyle that he did. But I did realize, when it comes to a lot of things, the way we think, talk, we sound pretty much identical. A lot of our behavior patterns, from things we like, from fashion. He likes cars. He can do a lot of things, fix things. He's way more talented. He plays the drums professionally. My father can design things. I think artistically, I liked writing screenplays, making movies, and doing things like creating like a podcast or stuff like that. He's more of a hands-on dude. I am more of, and we're both athletes, but I like just lifting weights. I wanted to be bigger and stronger. My father wanted to be thinner and fitter, kind of more European. We're both almost very European in our own way, but on different levels. We both really only want to eat Italian food, which is interesting. But, anyways, if you're falling in that, see, the reason I did a podcast on this is because I think a lot of dads now, you get very excited, and we're always these projections on how we're supposed to be a dad in 2018 or whatever, if you listen to this, whenever you listen to it. But there's a lot of things saying, no, a dad now has to be this way. He can't be like it was in the 70s or 80s or 90s or whatever, because those dads were absentee, or those dads didn't care, or those dads were the guys out there cheating, or the guys out there that didn't give a shit about their kids, which I don't believe that at all. I don't think you necessarily always have to be around for your kids. Or I should say, when I say that, I mean, obviously, if you're living with your kids, you're always going to be around, especially with daughters. I don't mean that. What I'm saying is always kind of at everything they do. And then also feel the guilt of missing certain things. Or I don't care if they're signing up for the first day of school again. If you like to go to it, you like to go to it. But having that obligation of like, oh my God, I got to do that. Oh, it's an orientation for this. I got to do that. They're doing this. I got to do that. I got to be there for my kid. I got to do this every practice. I got to be the team father, or I got to do this or that. That's what I kind of felt. And a lot of those things I did love, but after a while, I'm like, I don't really enjoy a lot of these things either. I wish I had some more time for myself. And I think that's where a lot of parents get kind of lost in the shuffle, especially as their kids go into teens and high school, and then they start living a life, and then the parents are like sitting at each other, looking at each other like, what the fuck do we do now? Both of us wrapped our life around our kids playing. It could be whatever it is. It could be baseball, basketball. It could be academics, playing chess, whatever it is. But I definitely think men have to realize you got to have your own life, and you can't just engulf your life into your children's. If you want to do that, God bless you. But I think a lot of times parents, to a certain degree, especially fathers, I can't speak because I'm not a mother, but as far as a father goes, I think I kind of want to be the dad too that kind of kicks it in the ass a little bit, where like I said, there is a mystique about me, especially now, where I'm not the guy. When I show up and I do things, I think they're more or less maybe excited to see me, but it's like, hey, I'm not the dad that's always going to be the one that I'm the dad that hopefully they understand is the one that's going to help support them financially, at all times when needed and getting shit accomplished. I'm not the guy who's always going to be sitting in the bleacher, just sitting there and then intermingling with all the mothers, or kind of the kiss-ass type guy who's got to be the one to always be picking him up, dropping him off from school, or all that type of things. It wasn't for me. And I think I really see a lot of fathers being almost programmed to be that way, and if they're not that way, or and that's really what I feel. And the one thing I would say, and I wish I would have done this, and I thought it would be a bad thing, is when I was getting ready to get a divorce and everything or whatever, maybe I should have said something earlier. And I think I think too, my ex-wife had to work her ass off, because then I wasn't working, taking care of the kids, and we're like, all right, for now, you work on your movie stuff, you do this. But the truth is, I think she wanted to be have a lot more freedom with the children, and I kind of consumed that. But if I would have said, hey, I'm not really comfortable always being Mr. Mom or being this, and she would have probably been like, well, I'm not comfortable always working or having to do that too. Maybe things could have worked out differently. I think regardless, me and my ex-wife were just totally different people as time went on. But I do think I should have been more honest with myself, but I was afraid of that. And I think even as time went on, people were always like, are you okay? My family members, my mother, my dad, everybody, because now I went from being a guy when I was younger on the streets, traveling, doing a lot of crazy shit. And then I became like this Mr. Mom character. And then they thought, oh my God, he found his calling, or he found himself and whatever. And then I kind of reverted back to who I truly was, I think. Which was, to a certain degree, liking women, different types of women. Traveling, doing whatever the fuck I want. When I want to do it with who I wanted to do it with. Not feeling sometimes as a prisoner. And I think a lot of times, a lot of men, they do, and women too, when you get in relationships or certain things are going on with children for certain amounts of times, you start to feel like a prisoner. But you're afraid to tell anybody, because you're going to be like, hey, you're a dick, man. You should just be a dad that's just there 24/7. Lift your kids up. Give them the life you never had. Better their life. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I'm like, who the fuck are you to tell anybody how I should raise my kids or how I should behave around my kids, especially religious figures? I'm not even going to get into them. Or a lot of people always giving advice weren't that great of a parent, I realized. Or the ones I was afraid to confront and say, hey, you know what, this is the way it is now, again, weren't that great to begin with. So I'm in fear of somebody who, for what? I just have to be honest with myself, right? I think that's what a lot of fathers, because when you first have your first kid, it's nothing like that, obviously. And then you have your second, wonderful. And it's an amazing experience having children. But as time goes on, it's just like anything else in life. It becomes, it's grueling. And as much as, as exciting it is, there's a lot of times where it's very aggravating and frustrating. Not only dealing with, if you're married or not married, if you're divorced, and your children, depending on what type of children you have. Some are very fucking frustrating at different times of their life, or some are just frustrating your whole life. Having a family sometimes isn't what it's always cracked up to be to a certain degree. I think Kenny Loggins once did that. He thought he'd have a massive family. I think, don't quote me. But some celebrity or musician was talking about, he thought the more kids he'd have, the happier he'd be, right? And having a huge family would make it fulfilled. But he said actually it wasn't that way at all. He actually found himself for long periods of time being very aggravated and feeling locked down and not having any freedom. So again, that's extreme. I'm not saying that that's how it is. But I think if you're a father, you're going to be going through a lot of different changes in your life. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But I guess you could say after everything is said and done, don't fall into something you're really not comfortable with. And a lot of times it's sliding that way slowly but surely. It could be month after month, year after year. Before you know it, you find yourself in a position where you're not yourself anymore. And that's kind of what happened with me. And to this day, my mother's like, I don't know what happened to you after you got a divorce. And I'm like, how was I before I got married? Well, you were this. Well, how am I now? Well, you're kind of like that. That's kind of who I was. I was just trying to change to make everybody else happy and trying to make myself look a certain way, different than what everybody else, because I thought I wasn't happy being that person, and I thought maybe being this type of person would make me happier. It wasn't the truth. It just wasn't the truth. Before you know it, I kind of felt boxed in. Now, after time, my mother and my parents, my father, even my ex-wife, and my kids, I think, understand that those were some of the best times of my life, but I'm not that person now, right? I've changed, and I think anyone in a relationship needs to understand they are evolving, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm not there 24 hours a day for them anymore, that it makes me a bad father, or I have to carry the guilt around, or that I got a divorce. I never wanted a divorce. Oh my God, I'll never be the guy to get divorced, and I ended up getting a divorce. But again, don't beat yourself up. That's just half the battle. Just fucking live your life. Your kids are going to love you as long as you truly, they know if you love them and you're out for their best interest. It's not about how many baseball games you go to or how many times you're always there for every, like I said. It's more about they just genuinely know you love them, you got their back. They also know they're going to end up in beefs with you, especially if it's a father-daughter, father-son. There's certain expectations we have, no matter what we say, that we're going to put on our children, and our children are going to put it on us. The one thing I would say is don't get in a situation where you make them enablers, kick them in the fucking ass, make them learn about money. I don't care if you have money or you're broke. Teach them things, responsibility, and how to treat others, and that their behavior is what really counts, I truly believe. And I don't care if you're religious, not religious, try to do the best by setting a certain example for your kids. But here's the deal. I am not always the best father. I may do things that they may not agree with, but the real deal is I am who the fuck I am, right? They have to understand that I grew up in a different time era, a different generation. I was raised by immigrant parents from Italy. It's just a whole different thing. For them to look at me, it's kind of shocking the way sometimes I talk or act, right? Because they only saw one side of me, say back to the Mr. Mom. But then they would see the other side of me, which is not that guy. And I think I hid that for too long. Even, a lot of things I did, which I won't even allow. Cable, anything dirty. No one would even be really allowed to swear on my kids, smoke, anything. But as time went on, I'm like, you know what? I think I got to kick these kids in the ass a little bit, even though they're my daughters. Like I started to break them into certain things, not meaning dirty or anything. Fucking, that's like ridiculous. But I'm just saying, becoming, segueing them into being young, good adults. And I'm very proud of what they turned out to be. And much better than me. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there, but that's it. You get a chance, check out my YouTube channel. I'm going to be always posting stuff on there regarding videos. I travel all over the country, showing different people where to how to save money and travel affordably. I also do different videos on hygiene, fashion, fitness. I do programs, Mastering Self-Confidence, which is a program to help men find the women of their dreams, even if they've been through a bad breakup or divorce. So if you like any of this, you may like a lot of that, especially if you've been divorced. All right. Well, take care, and I wish you nothing but the best.